Hello, friends and adventurers. I'm Em, and today I want to talk to you about alternative ways to reward your players. Welcome to the DM table. So, besides traditional rewarding of players for quests with items for their characters, and in pretty much direct progression sort of way, we can have all kinds of very nice and interesting and intriguing rewards that they could get that are in general much better for feeling of the campaign in question, for deepening their bond with what they're doing, what they're feeling, what they're progressing towards. Of course, equipment is good too, and we'll mention a couple of things that you can do with equipment as well, but indeed, these are gonna be some alternative ways to reward your players for completing quests and stages of your role-playing campaign. So, what can we do to reward them? Well, for one thing, as somebody once said, you can almost never reward your players too much. Now, this doesn't mean too much as in too much power, because power can sort of pile up and become meaningless. What this means is that you can use lots of opportunities to reward them, because anything that's worth doing is worth rewarding, and worth rewarding well. Anything that was completed, accomplished, or connected to something else that's finished with good grace should perhaps carry with itself some rewards that are described, obviously enough, because sometimes reward is in itself good enough if result is described most directly and understandably and with satisfaction that can be gained from it. The description is sufficient to convey what has happened and what are the benefits of the actions. It's not something that the DM has put in the back of their mind, mentioned once, and that's all there is to it. It was something that was brought to forefront, had meaning, had explanations, had atmosphere connected to it, had clarity to the players that they did it, that it's something that they've achieved, and then it carried some weight with it, which brought further quests and situations that involved them from their success from the previous. That is one alternative reward worth getting, and that's more interaction, more quests, more reactions, unique reactions, better reactions, some form of status, some form of accessing something that previously was not there, some new connections, bonds, friends, accomplices, allies, people that they know that owe them something or that appreciate them for something, people that tell them about other things that they could be doing, people that want them in their presence, and more. So interaction and fruit of success, as explained through events and consequences of success, if you will. Consequences of success, but yes. That's one reward that shouldn't be even considered alternative. You should always think about these, I suppose, so that your players can feel their successes bear fruit. Now, next thing I want to mention, but I probably should have first, is that you should experiment with rewards and probably have multiple rewards for everything where you want rewards to appear. It's like having multiple paths, except you take both. If you have two rewards, the situation is where one reward is experimental, you can sort of afford for one reward to fall a little bit flat as long as the other one does great. Well, DMing and indeed game making for live people is a lot like gambling. You do want to calculate the best odds of success, then invest, then get the rewards. Your rewards are success of your work. The rewards they want, well, you want to invest in them, and this is how you can sort of spread across the board somewhat. So if you have two different methods of rewarding for each situation, and if it's subtle enough that this isn't obvious that you are spreading as much reward as you can, which is achieved by realism, by the way. If you have realistic rewards that feel obvious and in place, or maybe not so obvious, but very much in place, where they belong, where they would have found themselves realistically, and where you thought them through very well, then it doesn't seem to the player's eye like you're just spreading across the board as much rewards as you can, which you aren't. You are sort of holding exact amount of lines that you want to test and connect to the quests, improve, and so on. So you're not just spamming, essentially, you are planning carefully for maximum quality of, say, couple of different lines, so that you have at least a multiple approach, but not excessive or singular, not putting, as they say, all eggs in one basket, but not also throwing a truckload of eggs everywhere. So indeed, experiment with rewards and try to have open slots where you can put them. Next step in this experimentation is, of course, hearing and asking, even during the campaign. Before the campaign, it's kind of obvious you want to find out interests of your players so that you can cater to them, but during the campaign, you can occasionally ask how did they like something, and you don't need to be obvious completely. You can just sort of ask them what do they think about a thing, a place, a reward. Just ask them what did they think, and you'll hear how much did they like it, and they probably might even toss in what they would like. Indeed, in some situations you outright want to ask them what would they like and need and make a list, just so that you're sure that you're filling out the campaign in a direction that you all wanted to go. In the end, sometimes there's just not that much need for secrecy between players and DM. So what other alternative rewards can we have? Well, whatever the players find fun. It doesn't need to be directly something that raises power. You can have clothes that look good. You can have nice locations that are appropriate for some activities that the party gets up to. You can have things that further their side quests or main quest or something else. Whatever it is, you can give them something that they like, that they use. Sort of look at what they normally like to do, also think what they could possibly be planning to like to do in the future, or possibly they could pick up to like in the future. It's almost like getting somebody into some sort of a hobby. You want to give them a gift that they would appreciate, but maybe they didn't expect, and certainly you want to also, as I mentioned in those multiple lines of rewards, give them the gift that they would know about and appreciate frequently enough, so that it hits both their current requests and, well, striving for reward and their unexpected feeling of discovery, of getting things better than they expected, of getting new things, of getting to do something new, something fun, to try something. Whatever it is, you can give it to them as long as it doesn't completely invalidate some of the previous things. However, sometimes that's also good, but only in the situation where the previous thing wasn't very important. A not so memorable sword, when replaced with a sword slightly better than it, is an okay deal, but everything else should be looked at as something that should be slightly more better or diversified from the equipment and abilities that they already have, so that you can have as much space and place to put new rewards in. Because whatever it is, no matter how unrelated, as long as it's useful and they don't have it yet, at least not in that capacity, that's something that they would appreciate. So if you have an item that creates bridges and they don't have it, that's good, and you can give it to them and they will appreciate it, and it will be fun and interesting and unique. If they have something similar, you might want to consider how much this replaces the previous thing and maybe do something else. Or maybe it's time for that feeling of a strict upgrade, but you don't want to do that without campaign reason that has either best interest of mechanics in the center or best interest of the story in its center. So that is usually used for specific stages of progression when you need to give out something indeed mechanically specific or story specific. Otherwise, the previous giving alternative approaches is the best bet to give alternative rewards. Also, rewards are sometimes, even when kind of completely useless, completely fun, because they indeed give a new ability that they never had before. Firstly, I should mention that this is like one of those things when they inherit a house or a farm or a tower or something, and even if they never were interested before, now almost every party does something fun with it. If they are bored and don't do anything with it, well, that's why you had multiple approaches to rewards. But if they do, they have used their new ability to as much of an effect as they wanted. And don't worry that this will distract from the story, because you can always involve everything that the players like and spend time on into more of the story, because everything can be connected with everything meaningfully as long as it's interesting, as long as it's fun, as long as it proceeds into some sort of activity and instigates further quests and action. So even if they decide to suddenly stop traveling and stay in the house and improve the house, this can do other things to the campaign that are just as fun. Maybe it's a interdimensional house that travels. Maybe it's a completely different campaign now, but whatever it is, it's interesting as long as you connect it with interesting things that you want them to progress through. Which brings us to another great reward that I've heard many people give out, and that's feats and, abilities, traits, whatever you want to call them per system, but new powers that they otherwise wouldn't have had, but in a meaningful way. Like studying under a master to learn a new technique in combat, or learning a new skill in the field of their choosing, or something like that. Maybe it's a completely new move that wasn't ever in the system before. This is very fun, but it does bring some difficulties of its own, because you don't want to introduce something that is not gonna fit. But if you have experience and confidence that you know what you're doing, you can even make new moves and techniques. Even ones that improve their classes depending on the balance and the situation. And then the other party members that didn't get the upgrades and would otherwise complain how they're being neglected can get other very valuable, powerful rewards that are not abilities. Or you can figure out how to balance this in alternative manners, where they could get great, powerful alternative abilities that don't replace previous abilities, don't add power, but they add completely new way of approach. Add some sort of selection that previously was just unavailable, and now they can interact with it. Similar to the house example. That's one of the best ways to balance everything, is that you keep the power level consistent, but you keep adding new interactions to the sides of the participants. If the power is the same, but now both sides can interact with, say, ice, where previously they could only interact with fire, that's what I'm talking about. It works perfectly to keep everything together and going. Finally, there is one other thing that players very much appreciate, and that's custom stuff that they can get as they personally sort of request or get rewarded with, so that they can specify what they like, so that they can put their name on it, so that it can look exactly as they request the craftsman to make it. That's usually a very memorable reward that everybody loves and keeps with themselves even when they're not using it too much eventually. Maybe, but if you're being careful with the balance, it could be something that will be used throughout the campaign. So adventure, if this was useful or unique, maybe you can spare me a click and I could see you here next, or maybe even every week. Until then, I wish you good luck on your adventures, and to see you again soon. Or maybe even in the comments. I would love to hear you in the comments. So until next time, bye.